George Carlin said, "Think of how stupid the average person is, and realize half of them are stupider than that. What real-life example have you seen that validates this view? There's a considerable overlap between the intelligence of the smartest bears and the dumbest tourists. From a Yosemite Park ranger on why it's hard to design a bear-proof garbage can. Yeah, I guess I could see how that would be a problem. I worked at a bank. Mobile deposits had just became a thing. We received a picture of someone's cash for deposit. Yeah. Man, just think of what would have to go on for that to be a thing. So you'd have to take a picture of the cash, and then what? Did they just input the serial number on the bill, and suddenly it transfers the balance into that, and then it just voids whatever the bill was? Imagine people are just passing cash around, not even knowing that half of those bills had been void already. Now suddenly your cash can bounce. A woman I used to work with who insisted that any animal could reproduce with any other animal. She believed that sperm from any animal was the same, and that DNA was irrelevant. She believed this because she once saw some sickly, possibly deformed puppies and decided that they must have been half dog and half rat. You know, the animal kingdom would be a much more interesting place if this was true. I mean, just look up the old game Impossible Creatures. The possibilities are endless. One of my nieces had a cold as a toddler and was breathing through her mouth. My ex-brother-in-law flipped out because he didn't want her to get carbon monoxide poisoning from breathing through her mouth instead of her nose, the normal way. I can't say I've ever heard that one before. I teach 6th grade. One time a parent came to me after trying to help their child with math homework and asked, "What number is X worth? It feels like it changes with every problem." Yeah, that's the problem with integers, you can never trust them. On 9/11, the general manager called his daughter, who was attending ASU, to wake her up and make sure she saw what was going on. The customer service manager said, "It won't be on her TV yet. Arizona's 2 hours behind us." Oh right, time zones are actually just time travel. I worked at Little Caesars, and we were proofing the dough for pizza. My boss said at 7 p.m. that the dough needed to rise for 12 hours, and took her calculator to do the math. She said, that's gonna be 7 a.m. Then she said the dough will expire in 48 hours, and started doing the math again. I told her it would expire 2 days from now, and she said, "That's kinda weird how that works out, huh?" I quit shortly after that. Yeah, it is weird how that works out, just like how these videos always come out every 48 to 72 hours. Just scroll down a webpage for Facebook feed and have a look at the ads. Things like, "Only 2% can solve this puzzle." Stuff like that. Those ads get posted so much because they actually work on a lot of people. Yeah, I've come across a lot of stuff like that. The absolute worst is when you see one that's like, "If you can solve this, your IQ is over 180. And I'm just like, don't tell people that, man. You're gonna inflate some egos that really do not deserve it. I'm an insurance claims adjuster. If you truly knew how many stupid drivers you were sharing the road with, you'd never drive again. What are you talking about? I think everyone is aware that they are the smartest person on the road at all times. At the start of working from home due to COVID, I had a few users submit tickets for connectivity issues. These tickets got through 2 lines of support before landing in my queue. Turns out that the corporate Wi-Fi doesn't follow you home, and you need home internet in order to connect to the VPN. How long before we are all just on the same page of knowing how the internet works? I mean, come on, you've had decades to figure this stuff out. In grade 10, we had a science test, and the teacher gave 1 point for putting a date on the paper, and 1 point for your name on the paper. And there was 98 points for the rest of the test. A guy sitting in front of me got a 0.5 out of 100. Didn't write the date and only wrote his first name. I actually remember my teachers doing that stuff before. I had a science test once where the very last multiple choice question was, "What school are you going to?" But then you get people who just fill out random bubbles all the way through, not even reading the test. And then the teacher looks at somebody's page, he's like, "Travis is still trying to figure out what school he goes to." In the 80s, A&W attempted to compete with McDonald's Quarter Pounder burger by selling a third pounder for the same price. The operation failed tremendously, with virtually no one buying the burger. When they surveyed customers for an explanation, the majority of customers responded that they didn't want to pay the same price for less meat. Their customers genuinely believed that 1/3 was less than 1/4 and refused to try the new A&W burger because of it. See, this is when we just start using people's stupidity to our advantage and start making 1/10 pound burgers, and then charge double for it. I was at a party, and someone's crappy old truck got stuck in some mud, so instead of sobering up and coming back the next day, he makes a Molotov cocktail with gas and throws it at the truck. The truck caught fire and was completely destroyed. "Aw man, my truck is stuck in the mud. Well, it's garbage now." I knew a kid who drank bleach to prove it wouldn't kill you. A week later, he showed up at school after taking a shot. He said he proved his point when the teacher asked why he was bragging about it. Mr. Hawk just said, "But you cannot argue that without that medical treatment you'd have died though. You even said you had stomach damage and a burnt esophagus yourself." The kid was bragging about that. He was not mentally disabled or otherwise. He was just that kind of idiot. Well maybe he was just trying to show off how good his healthcare was. You know the reason you bury a rattlesnake after you kill it is because bees will eat it. Then bees can sting people with rattlesnake venom. From a guy I heard constantly trying to pick up women on public transit. This is one of those instances where I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's not true, but I don't know enough about bees to really argue against it. A former coworker was talking about how she wanted to go back to school to get her master's degree, because she only had a Bachelorette degree, and wanted more job opportunities. I said, don't you mean a bachelor's degree? But she insisted it was pronounced Bachelorette when it was given to a woman. Then she led me back to her office and pointed at her diploma, to the word Bachelorette, and said, see, Bachelorette. So last week there was the story of that guy that thought that nurse was just the female version of doctor, and doctor was the male version. So does that mean if a woman gets a doctorate, she's actually getting a nurse degree? I worked with a lady who was remarking on how a friend of hers had lost a bunch of weight. She pondered, I wonder how many Diet Cokes she had to drink to do that. Hey, we all know that if any food has the word diet at the front of it, it means that it's going to remove the fat when you eat it. About half the calls I take on a daily basis. So people call 911 to ask whether Walmart is open, to report that they didn't get enough mayo on their burger, to complain that cleanup at a fatality wreck is taking too long. All sorts of silly, out-of-touch stuff. Granted, there is probably some level of mental illness and or substance abuse present in those calls, but still. I guess some people just see 911 as like the universal customer support number. But yeah, I have heard when websites like Facebook or YouTube go down, a bunch of people call the police to let them know. On The Man Show, they set up a booth on some pier, I think it's Santa Monica, and were getting women to sign up to end women's suffrage. Tons of women were signing. Obviously, being The Man Show, this was a joke on women, but the reality is the amount of people in general who do not know that suffrage is the right to vote, and not some sort of suffering, is far too high. Okay, but imagine this. What if we held a national vote to end women's suffrage? You know, that might turn out to be the last vote a lot of people ever make. A friend of mine showered in cold water for a year, because he never thought of turning the other tap to see what it would do. Yeah, I've kind of been in that mindset before too, where it's just like, yeah, I have a problem. I don't really care enough to try and figure out a solution to it. I'm just gonna deal with it, I guess. I worked in retail for a few years, and it taught me that many people are either incapable or unwilling to read. I have people walk up to me and ask how much something is, only for the price tag to be featured prominently on the item. It's $9.99, ma'am. How did you know? It says so on the price tag, ma'am. Okay, that's definitely taking it too far, but I do have to complain when people have like 100 signs up all over the front of their store, and then they're just like, didn't you read the sign? I'm like, which sign? No, I didn't stop and read every page that you have listed on the front of your store, sorry. I used to manage a retail store that sold teen clothing, so as expected, I primarily had teens working for me. One employee came to the back room while I was on break and asked what I was eating. Somehow the topic turned to how I should have brought chicken for lunch because she wanted chicken. I told her I was a vegetarian and therefore don't eat meat. She tells me chicken is not meat, it's poultry, and vegetarians can eat poultry. She said at the grocery store the aisle lists meat and poultry separately, so they're obviously different. We argued for a couple of minutes before I finally told her to go back to the sales floor. She didn't last at that job long, but man. Yeah, it is kind of weird because I've met a lot of vegetarians who were like, yeah, I don't eat meat, but I will eat chicken. And it's not like they don't know that that's meat, it's just that I guess white meat is okay. I had a bald man return a hairdryer because it burnt his head. Well, either that hairdryer worked so well that it burned all his hair off, or he hasn't looked in the mirror in a while. My dad is a pesticide investigator for the state and heard this on a complaint. I set out all these bird feeders and bird baths, but not one bird comes to my yard. I bet it's all those pesticides that Crop Duster is laying down in the field. From a local school board member, as they were standing in her 5-acre yard with 20 or more cats running around. Yeah, Faye back here has caught a few birds. I think she sees them as toys because she likes to bring them inside while they're still alive so she can chase them around the room and I've got to try and catch it and set it free. Getting a misdialed call from a random person who gets mad at you because you're not the person he was looking for. Happens to me several times a year. Don't worry, I'm sure that if you get angry enough, you can convince them that they are the person that you are looking for. And if not, just call 911, maybe they'll be able to help. I had a friend once who truly believed that magicians like Chris Angel and David Blaine had some kind of magical power or telekinesis, something along those lines. While watching one of those magicians on TV performing on the street, he argued, "How could this be fake? Look at all those people. Can't fake all that. Has to be some kind of power or magic." I would then have to ask, do you realize that movies are fake? They fake entire universes, planets, cities, wars. He didn't get what I was getting at. Yeah, well, he's probably not the only person that thinks these people have superpowers, because didn't David Blaine run some massive cult who all thought that he was like some messiah? I just had a customer yell at me for putting their eggs in a separate bag, saying they don't want all those bags and the paper ones always rip, before putting it in the bag and throwing a pound of flour on top. It was somewhat satisfying seeing their face as we heard the cracks, until I realized I'm the one who needs to clean it up. Oh, and she also complained that we hadn't warned her about the fragility of eggs. I guess sometimes you just can never win. I work at a restaurant. We were low on tomatoes for our tomato soup, so one person grabbed potatoes to see if we could use those instead. Surprisingly, nobody's figured out how to juice a potato yet. Can I get a medium pizza? We actually only have large. Oh, okay. Let me get a small then. We only sell large pizzas. Oh, I see now. I'll go ahead and get the medium then. Man, at that point, just stop arguing. Just give him the large. And if I had to place a bet, I would say this is Little Caesars. A girl in one of my college classes argued that heart transplants shouldn't be allowed because that's where the feelings are, and the person receiving the heart wouldn't be the same person anymore. Yeah, you better hope that you don't get an evil person's heart, because then you just might become a murderer after that. I used to work in travel, and the amount of people that did not understand the following was staggering. You cannot take a 3 to 7 round-trip night cruise from Miami to Australia, and no, your friend did not just book this. No, there are in fact no ocean-bound cruises leaving from Arizona. You cannot take a cruise from Miami to Hawaii and back in 7 to 10 days. No, the airport is closed due to hurricane, flood, and ice, and you cannot demand a flight on a different carrier out of the same airport in the next hour. Also no, you did not just see someone book this. Yes, it is a shorter flight for your friends from the East Coast to the Caribbean than you in Europe, and no, nobody can change that. Yes, I will need your DD-214 to confirm a military rate. No, your word you were in a covert unit will not suffice. And no, I am not disrespecting the military because I cannot simply take your word for it. Yes, if a passport/visa/travel vaccinations are needed for you to travel, you will need it, and no, a manager cannot override this, as it is a government requirement. I've been doing this for 6 years, and no, your friends, neighbors, hairdressers, roommates, cousins, mailman does not know more about this than I do. Oh well, we got to end that one off with a bang. But you know, back to the whole question topic where it says, think about how stupid the average person is, and then realize that half of them are stupider than that. I think that when you tell somebody to think of how stupid the average person is, they're automatically going to think of the stupidest person they know. It's really hard for anyone to gauge what average stupidity really looks like, and so that concept is a bit too difficult to visualize properly. But that's not to say it's hard to find stupidity around here. If you're really looking for that, just go install TikTok.